oh no, our journey through Narnia is only at its peak. We are about to go into the most controversial book in the entire series. Not because of the lore dividing thing here, not because of the fact that there's racism or whatever, or the fact that apparently Jesus just took us from this world and, from another world and put it here, apparently, and this is the allegory or whatever. So if you really think about it, Jesus brought us into this world and didn't necessarily create us into this world, and the Satan apparently is a evil witch that apparently came from another world as well. Is a lot of cuckoo craziness, a lot of weird unanswered questions that just add more questions. But no, this last book, The Last Battle, if you will, entails a whole lot of very, very controversial things that take place. That, a lot of crazy shenanigans that happens in this book that, entails a lot of death, a lot of real world death, some people that are left out because they wanted to have a social life, but we also have blackface. Yes. Technically it's not blackface, but technically you can also see it as being blackface. Yeah. We're in that section of writing now. Something that really shouldn't have been made, but we're here. Yay. Now, here's just something to keep in mind here in regards to The Last Battle. I don't really understand the reason why C.S. Lewis decided to do this particular thing. Of course, it's a allegory for the Bible, of course, but, you can do other things, I guess. Maybe you just found the first book to be just so, good with the Jesus story, decided to just make the two creation and, destruction books in the Bible as well. That's right. So the first book, quote unquote, the first prequel book, The Magician's Nephew, is technically an allegory for, the book of Genesis, specifically where God created the earth, man and women, the works. Hence why I had an issue with it, because that's saying a lot of things that are very, quite deviation of the said, Genesis. But like that, this book, The Last Battle, is supposed to be an allegory for the book of Revelation, aka the Apocalypse book. A book that is so dense and so just nonsensical in nature that scholars are still trying to decipher this thing today. It's that bizarre, and it's in the Bible, so there's that. But take that book of the Bible, and see if you can translate it to a fantasy world of Narnia for kids. Oh, we're in a sea of just wild, crazy shenanigans these days, okay? Get ready for this. Just like The Horse and His Boy, this book is almost exclusively told from the perspective of a human Narnian, like you do, and they don't really talk a whole lot about the humans that are coming in, but they're here. Oh, just wait. It gets real juicy in a second. So there's this ape creature, right? And he's just basically abusing this donkey fellow. And all of a sudden, apparently, they see a lion's skin in a waterfall. So the donkey goes and gets it and struggles a lot to get it. And the ape guy's like, yeah, screw you, just keep on going and all that. But he finally gets it. The ape guy tells him to, dress up in the skin and pose as Aslan to take over Narnia, aka the allegory for the Antichrist. It's that type of... We're in that type of story, kind folks. Buckle up. I just have a few minor questions in this particular part of the book already. Like, first of all, who hunted animals in this world? I know there's, wars fought between humans and animals, but I didn't know they're actually, hunted, especially in Narnia, because the animals are, sentient and, speak. But then again, these are humans that are somehow more barbaric than the pirates that came over. So whatever, lore out the window. Second, why is there a lion? Why? How can there possibly be another lion within this world that's not Aslan? I have never seen, throughout these entire 6 novels up until this point, I have never heard of another lion populating this world until now. So there you go. There's that too. Once again, lore out the window, whatever. We then cut to the new king of Narnia. Yes, it is not William, nor is it Caspian, thank God. Not that I'm not a fan of Caspian. I'm actually am a pretty big stan of Caspian, but still, I mean, it's time to move on. The world, okay, inconsistency, let's move on. King Tyrion, no, not Game of Thrones Tyrion, the other Tyrion, and his unicorn just lounging around, just saying, hey, I heard that Aslan returned. Isn't that wacky? But then, a centaur comes around and is like saying, hey, I've seen the stars in the sky, aka astrology, if you will. I didn't even know, CS believed in certain things, but whatever. Anyway, using astrology, deciphered that, the world is in danger. But, Tyrion's like, okay, star lover, you might be a little dense here. Let's calm down here. But all of a sudden, tree people come over and they're just like, hey, people are chopping down our trees and we're dying as a result, because of the trees, they're dying. And then Tyrion's like, oh shoot, well, time to saddle up. So, he goes and he goes and he goes and he's seeing this water rat that apparently gives him another piece of lore dump that Aslan has decreed that all the lumber be sold to the quote-unquote Islamic empire that Narnian tends to, love and endure, if you will. Now, here's a little a side note, if you will. I would assume... I don't have, concrete evidence to, decipher this, but after reading all these books, I assume that the only reason the horse and his boy exists in the first place is to kind of set the groundwork for this, quote-unquote Islamic empire, the Calorman Empire, so that, selling lumber to these people is wrong and evil and all that stuff. I would assume that's the reason why a horse and his boy was there to begin with, but, you never know. It's because up until the horse and his boy, we haven't heard a single thing about this empire, but this one book that's kind of a midquel to the first book exists probably to do that. So, you wonder why it exists? There it is. But then, Tyrion's all like looking up and seeing Calormans. Oh no, they're enslaving Narnian horses. So he goes out and attacks them and he kills them. But he's so guilt-ridden because he's disproved the plan of Aslan that he surrenders himself to the Calorman, the next Calorman that comes around and all that, which, Yeah. Also, this is the start of the impending racism this book is known for, or should be known for, because, oh, it's juicy. Won't dive into it here, but let's just say, if you're sensitive to, racism, especially from the 1950s, about, Middle Easterns, don't read this book. Anyway, he's taken captive and he's greeted by the monkey from the beginning of the book. And apparently the monkey, he has an alliance with the Calormans, but he's had an alliance with the Calormans the entire time, but the lion skin was the last little thing to give the bid for power. And, he's starting an invasion of Narnia and all that. And basically another LLD, if you will, a Lewis lore dump from this character as well. Thank you for telling and not showing C.S. Lewis. Also, apparently, oh gosh, because the lion skin is so, rough, the Aslan lion, supposedly that the skin and all that, the donkey only has to come out at night, so no one really can look at him really closely and all that. But the monkey, he's saying that Aslan said that he is not only the king of Narnia, the god of Narnia, but he's also the god of, the Calormans, aka Tash. So, yeah, he wants to be called Tashlan. And in case none of you really understand what's going on here, this is the Antichrist allegory that resonates throughout the book of Revelation and all that. It's being put here, and yeah, it's a little shaky, to say the least. But Tashlan, as he wants to be known now, he says to the Narnians, hey, you gotta be temporarily, quote unquote temporarily enslaved by the Calormans to do their bidding, aka, the horses draw the carriages and all that crap. But Tyrion says, hey, this is not good. This is actually a well-crafted, manipulative invasion. And, he tries to fight them off. But yeah, the ape guy, he's like, oh, no, you gotta be tied up to the tree so we can, we'll figure out what to do with you later. Yada, 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 whatever. Loyal rats, they come over and help him, feed him, give him water and stuff like that. But, he, still becomes delirious as the nights go on and all that, and he just wishes that the transdimensional children that helped his ancestors in the past and all that, would help him, now. And all of a sudden, boom, there you go. You get all the travelers to Narnia all in one spot having dinner together in a vision. You got the Peregrine children, you got the, you got Eustace, you got Jill, you got Diggory, you got Polly, aka the stands of the whole thing, in my opinion. But you get the whole gang just seeing this one guy, and he's like, oh, hey, it's you. And they're like, oh, hey, it's a Narnian. But then the image goes away and all that. But later on, Eustace and Jill, they're back. They're here. They untie the king and all that, and they're like, oh hey, it's kind of weird that every time we get over here, everyone's dead. Well, that's kind of sad, really. But whatever. Anyway, they don't really remember how exactly they got to Narnia this time. How they got to Narnia in the past, wardrobe, the train in Prince Caspian or whatever, the weird, painting and the Dawn Shredder, the weird door in the silver chair or whatever. They don't remember. This time, All they really remember is a just out of control train just trying to zoom right by a train station. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, although the plan was since they saw this Narnia, they're like, oh hey, we gotta go get those rings and all that, and that's why technically Eustace Eustace and Jill were on the train platform and all that. So there you go. But yeah, we gotta put that aside. We gotta deal with this because this is more important. Whatever. There you go. So the King Tyrion, he goes and brings the kids over to this little fort thing that he stockpiles with all this, the weapons and defense and blackface. Yeah, here it is. The racism part of this whole thing, blackface. Apparently, they put this on to fool the Calormans, putting dark stuff on their shoulders and arms and faces and all that to fool the Calormans. And it doesn't wash off in water, and the only way to get it off is with some salt or whatever. I don't know, but it's basically Narnian blackface. And I get it, the apologists will say, well, technically it's, they're just a made up, universe race of people and all that, but okay, but it's still bad. Green, maybe, okay? You can get away with green, but not, the Asian allegory, the Middle Eastern allegory that you just so happen to include in your story for kids. Gosh, this story just went downhill real fast. And it's also very bizarre and weird that they included this one part, that Lewis, included this part, because it doesn't necessarily need to happen, because literally almost 3 seconds after they meet anybody, Tyrion goes around and knocks the people out, the Calormans out, or, kills them. So, yeah, there's that too. But it's during this racist charade or whatever that he rescues the unicorn and rescues a very apologetic donkey that used to be the Tash Lan, if you will. And after that, they come across a band of Calormans, enslaving some dwarves, and all of a sudden, Tyrion comes out and he's just like, it's all zoom, zam, chopping heads. And this part is the weirdest part of the entire book, in my opinion. Yes, we've seen blackface. Yes, we've seen anti-Aslan person thing where it's just the most bizarre thing ever. But this is the most bizarre thing in this entire book, in my opinion. Of course, you could make the argument for many things I've mentioned previously, but this one is the most bizarre thing, for my opinion at least. The dwarves, after being rescued, decide to not follow Aslan at all, and instead become basically atheists that don't believe in anything. Only one dwarf decides to follow the, King Tyrion and all that stuff. Now, here's the thing. I get it. It's been 200 years since the kids came back and all that type of stuff. But the dwarves, they went and didn't see Aslan for 400 years from, the Peregrine children. I know I'm mispronouncing their names. I'm sorry. But yeah, the other kids, they haven't been there for 400 years and their faith was not shaken. It's only at this point that they decide, screw Aslan, screw Tash, screw all the gods, we're just gonna be atheists now. When I get it, if it was 400 years in the first time, but now is when, after all these miracles, after seeing basically, This lion that can basically be the deus ex machina of this entire world, you know that he exists, but instead you're just going to be atheist now. Why? I don't get it. I would get it more if you were, didn't see Aslan for like the 400 years between Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe and Prince Caspian, but now is when you're going to be, atheists. Now. I don't get that. That's the biggest lore deviation in this entire franchise that is just completely idiotically stupid. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. Also, I forgot to mention that the whole ring thing to get to Narnia, I would assume, is because it's the whole reason why the magician's nephew exists, to explain why they can get rings now to, transwarp themselves to Narnia retroactively. But I don't care. The magician's nephew rocks. Okay, just screw that. Okay, whatever. I don't care if that's the whole reason why he wrote the magician's nephew. Good going, CS. Too bad this book's not anywhere near that point. But back to the story. The dwarf, joins the gang, but apparently there's this huge cloud filled with nightmares that sweeps through the land. That apparently is, in fact, Tash, the god of the Calormans. He exists. How? How does he exist? We haven't seen or heard about this thing ever existing, just being, just this arbitrary thing that the Calormans maybe, pray to or whatever, but thought it was just being a false god. But no, he exists. After explaining how the White Witch exists in this universe, you would think that, maybe he'd include Tash in this creation of the universe too. Yeah. Whatever. Screw that, I guess. But then an eagle comes over to the king to give another lore dump. And it's big. A big eagle. Gee, I wonder where he got that from. Okay, I'm sick and tired of this. Okay, there's a lot of stealing from Lord of the Rings, okay? Just be honest here. And this lore dump, okay, this Lewis lore dump is probably the most gut-wrenchingly just stupid amongst the entire lore dumps that have ever come up to this point. This lore dump that this eagle says basically tells us all that the Calormans have invaded from the ocean and have now attacked Narnia and has enslaved the entire kingdom and destroyed the armies and all that stuff. Narnia's taken over. The end, basically. Yeah, after, thousands of years of this Narnian history, after 6.5 books of trying to defend this one land, you mean to tell me that the entire country of Narnia, the thing that we've been invested in for so long, is taken out by a backstory? We don't even get to see the last battle in the last battle. Are you kidding me? So yeah, basically, King Tyrion's like, hey, listen, Eustace and Jill, you can go back if you want to, but I'm going to try to rescue as many Narnians as I can and try to make a last stand, just to die with honor, basically. But Eustace and Jill, they're all like, yeah, no, we'll still be here. We're going to help you out. And he's like, okay, thanks. And then they go rush off to battle the ape and all that stuff. And they were making a very convoluted reason as to why you can't see Tashland anymore. And yeah, this thing, the Calormen and this weird cat come up with this plan that you have to go in to the stable to see Aslan if you dare, and all that type of stuff. And the only people that kind of challenge him on this are the atheist dwarfs who shout racial slurs at them. Oh, why? Now, okay, this whole story is sort of messy, right? Get ready. We're not done yet. So the cat decides to, sort of be the example and go see Tashland to, do their thing and all that and come out like, oh yeah, I saw Tashland. He was pretty sweet. And then anyone else who tries to go see him, they would eventually, perish and die or, be killed because, the Tashland's not there. But then all of a sudden, the cat comes out and is so freaked out that he devolves back into like a non-talking cat and scares away and goes away forever. But apparently the one good Calorman, he goes in, he wants to go in to see his god, but apparently, the other Calorman's like, no, don't do it. Really, my dude, do not do it. But he's like, I don't care, I'm going to do it. He does it. He's got the weird, people think that he's dead too and all that. So then, the guy's like, oh shoot, I royally screwed up. So then he starts throwing people into this. He starts throwing the animals into the stable, just, attacking them, basically. Sacrificing them to Tash and all that. But, King Tyrion is like, oh, hell no. And he's like running and running and running, thinking that the animals will be at his side, but they are not. They run away or just stand there. Yeah, so there's that too. But there are some that do, in fact, try to help out, including a lot of dogs. So there you go, all those dog lovers out there. And in fact, it was during all this when, they started to attack and they started this final battle. Yes, this is technically the final battle, even though it's a little bit of a skirmish, but whatever. And, they're fighting. They kind of beat back the Calormans at the very beginning and all that, and even throw the ape guy into the stable. There you go. He gets his own medicine. And then the horses, they come riding over the mountain and all that in a heroic escapade. But then all of a sudden, the dwarves decide to attack both sides. So there's like a three-way war here. The Battle of the Five Armies? Battle of Three Armies, ladies and gentlemen. Gee, I wonder where he got that. Okay, I'm done with that. But the Calormans take that rather seriously, unlike the Narnians who are just like, curse them or whatever. But the Calormans are like, oh, screw these dwarves. And they attack the dwarves, leaving only 11 alive. And they throw the 11, bind them up, throw them into the stable. And it's 11 dwarves. The Hobbit had 11 dwarves. I'm not even going to pretend anymore. But then at the very end of this last battle, everyone's basically dead or in the stable, except for this Calorman and Tyrion. And Tyrion's like gasping for his life and all that. And he's like, well, I'm going to go in the stable. You're going in the stable too. And he throws both of them into said stable. And yes, I know, we're getting to it. We are getting to it. This is the point. Here we go. So, turns out in the stable, they don't actually die. They actually are transported to this heavenly field, if you will. And who inhabits this field? It's Aslan. Oh, thank God. The actual Jesus lion guy. Not Tashland, but Aslan, the OG. And who else is here? But, it's everyone. It's the kids, the Peter, Edmund, and all that. And they're all here, looking dapper in all their Narnian clothes. And apparently Tash is also here, and he's like, oh, I'm going to take this Calorman and, kind of kill him and all that. And then Aslan's like, all right, leave. And Tash is like, all right, cool. Also worthy of note, the ape guy, he's also taken by Tash. So there's that too. whatever, screw him. But it is here. We are here, finally, that the most controversial thing in all of Narnia is upon us. We are here. This is the point of no return. This is it. I mean, except for the whole racism type of deal. Many people are very, very divided on this. A lot of Narnian fans are like, oh, this is a symbol of something, but the other people are like, no, this is a symbol of another thing. So we'll get into it. So the kids, they talk to Tyrion, and he's like, oh, hey, where's Susan? And they're like, oh, hey, Susan doesn't believe in Narnia anymore. She believes in, makeup and crap. Apparently, she wanted to grow up so much and stay exactly where she's at now that she's just forgets everything about Narnia and just believes in the fact that it was just, a imaginary world or whatever that they used to play in, but she's more focused on, having a social life rather than, believing in Narnia. And the weirdest part of all, something that wasn't really made clear necessarily, unless you take into account the whole, the vision of everyone who's been in Narnia together at a dinner table that the King Tyrion saw when he was tied up to a tree, maybe. But Jill and Polly, two people who as of reading all of these books, I have never seen any interaction between them and Susan, except for that one dinner scene. But yeah, they speak up and they're like, oh yeah, Susan sucks now. She's all pretty and all that crap. Which, that's a kind of a loophole. If their only interaction is just that dinner or whatever. I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering certain things, but if any of you guys know if Polly or Jill met with Susan before these books and all that, please comment and let me know, because I have absolutely no idea. These books have basically rotted my brain. Some for good and some not so good. But then also we see the 11 dwarves that, were, let's say they are, what are they? Paganists? Atheists? Whatever you want to call them. They are basically in purgatory, where, they're in the Aslan's land, if you will, or this really, really great country, Aslan's country, if you will, even though they don't really call it that, but it's some kind of heaven and earth or whatever. So they are technically in their world, but they perceive this world as being the actual stable. So they're like, eating turnips and smelling weird stuff and all that. And it's basically an allegory for purgatory because, yeah, they didn't believe in anything. They're atheists. And it's also here that, people who believed in Tash, they, are in this land too. They're not, perceiving this as a actual stable, So I guess Lewis's thing is to believe in something rather than nothing. Because if you believe in nothing, you're going to be just like these 11 dwarves. Okay. Then Aslan goes out of the stable and signals that it's time, apparently. I don't know. And then all the animals, they come up there and get divided between the good, which they get to enter into the stable, and the bad, which, if they're bad, they devolve into regular animals and just skimper on over like regular animals should. There's no mentions of humans, so yeah, there's that. I guess they just die. Whatever. And Narnia gets destroyed. The entire civilizations, all the world gets destroyed. Giant waves, meteorites crashing, just everything. Everything is just destroyed. Dragons tear up the forest. Father Time wakes up and is just, wrecking havoc, and just the sun goes supernova before Father Time just squishes it again, I guess, or something. I don't know. Stars fall out of the sky. It's just an apocalypse. The apocalypse is here. Aslan goes back into the stable and all that, and the Chlorman is like, oh, hey, listen, I'm kind of regretting the whole Tash thing. Can I still worship you? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So basically, in this very convoluted reasoning, I don't know why, maybe he didn't necessarily know the good news of Aslan and all that in this world, but in his reasoning, Aslan says that it is okay because all the good that you have done with worshiping Tash was actually for me, and all the bad was actually for Tash. So yeah, you're good. So yeah, apparently, if you worship anything but you're good, then you can go into heaven, but if you do something evil, then you go to hell. And it's actually for the devil. Even if you worship the devil and you're good, you get to go to heaven. Some notes. Some notes, C.S. Lewis. Okay, fine, whatever. I'll get to it at the end. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this book. The weirdest of all. The weirdest of all things. I mean, first Narnia, gets destroyed and all that just randomly, kind of. But now it gets even weirder. So buckle up. Oh gosh, we're in for a ride. If you didn't think the ride was this weird before, oh, get ready. Here we go. So apparently, everyone's like, oh, hey, we don't feel tired and we don't feel fear anymore. So they just run. They start running and running and running up until they running to the west, into the west. On the horizon. Yes, this is another Lord of the Rings. Whatever. I'm not even, whatever. Anyway. They run and they run and they run until they get to these golden gates. And upon reaching these golden gates, who are they going to meet? Well, they meet everyone. They meet everyone that has ever existed within these books. They meet Mr. Tumnel. They meet the rat sword guy, the beavers. They meet them all. Everyone, everywhere. Even the first king of Narnia and all that. They're all there. They're all 100% there. Yay. Also, okay, get ready for this. Apparently, they look off in the distance and there's a brand new Narnia in the distance that's kind of, better than the original Narnia. And in that distance is a better and new England with the professor's not demolished home. And apparently, according to these people, Narnia is like a physics-defining onion, where the deeper you go, the bigger and better it gets. So, I don't know. I really have no clue. Obviously, this is kind of what the Bible says, where there's a new heaven and a new earth and all that type of thing. But the way it's written in this book, it's like they're going under into another, weird world, like a new portal to another Narnia world. It seems a little bit like that, where the stable is kind of like the wardrobe, where they're transported to this other world. Yeah, it's very bizarre and very, very hard to understand, just like the Book of Revelation. And also at the very end, we get this little thing here, the more weirder thing. Again, it gets even weirder than before. So yeah, everyone's like, oh yeah, this is the happily ever after and all that. So Lucy prepares herself to get transported back, but Aslan's like, what you doing? And she's like, I'm getting ready to go back because, we're done. The adventure's over. But Aslan's like, you don't have to worry about that. Apparently, the little jolt you guys found out on the train and all that, yeah, you actually died And yeah, you're here forever now. And the adventures that you had in Narnia are only a fraction of what you're going to experience now. And then he supposedly, morphs into Jesus and all that, supposedly. And yeah, that's the end. Oh boy. So I don't know necessarily how to explain all the notes that I have partaking of this book. Let's just get started, shall we? Okay, first I'm going to talk about the whole, doing good within your own set of religion is actually doing it out of the kindness and goodness of God and all that this book's trying to represent. That's a little bit troublesome, especially since, there's a lot of cults. And if you really think about it, for one thing, the whole, cults with I forget what their name is, but there's this cults that, they were trying to kill themselves to reach this comet and all that, and they all, 100 people, died due to things that I can't really say on YouTube, so there's that. Did they, because they, offed a lot of people, did they go to heaven? Are you saying that if they did that in Narnia, that they would be in Aslan's country or whatever? This type of deal? I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe it's because we're C.S. Lewis and I are kind of different denominations of Christianity or something, but I don't know. This is a little shaky, and a lot of people who actually read the book as adults also say that this is kind of shaky, especially since these are supposed to be the Narnian Islamics, Narnian Muslims. So yeah, it's a little iffy, to say the least. I think that's a very noble type of deal and all that. Don't get me wrong, but I just gotta think that it's a little iffy. There's the knowledge is there, the good nature's there, but the knowledge doesn't really back up the good nature, in my opinion. Also, the big controversy surrounding this whole story, Susan. Yeah, you can't really do a whole thing on the last battle of Narnia without talking about the problem with Susan. So, like the Dark Tower, I think it's best to kind of go into what the author was intending to do with Susan before we, obliterate this storyline, or obliterate this story section, I guess. Before we talk about, that we need to talk about C.S. Lewis himself. So Lewis was actually a born-again Christian. He grew up as a Christian and then became atheist later on in his life, but then came back to Christianity sometime before he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. So, yeah, he was a born-again Christian and all that. And he also says in one of his letters, apparently kids had an issue with Susan, not being able to go into Narnia as well. I mean, they're not stupid. They know that. So Lewis actually wrote a letter, which you can find in some of his, letter compilations and all that type of thing, that he said that, maybe Susan eventually did come back around and become, go to Narnia, like the new Narnia and all that, There's always time, and there's always, a way to get back to Narnia and stuff like that, So I would think that Susan, especially in this story, would technically be an NPC, if you will, of C.S. Lewis and his experience and all that. Where, yes, he became an atheist, but then he became a born-again Christian. So there's always time to get back to Narnia and stuff like that, right? There's always time to go back to Christianity and all that type of stuff. Now, I get that sentiment, and I get, that whole storyline and all that, but and this is a big but, the way it's written and the way her story kind of wraps up isn't quite that well done, in my opinion. The only reason she doesn't get on the train to help them out is because she's got a social life and wears makeup and goes to parties and stuff like that. Yeah. Now, there are hints in the other books, and I didn't really say where there are hints, so you guys can, figure that out or whatever. But there are hints within the wider scope of Narnia that Susan would kind of be the one to do this. I mean, Jill wouldn't necessarily do this. Eustace wouldn't technically do this because they just, got into Narnia and they're still young enough to be like, yeah, we believe in Narnia and all that. Peter is very headstrong and he's all like, yes, Narnia exists. Narnia's always existed, yada, 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 He's the great leader and all that type of thing. Edmund and Lucy, they're tied with Eustace with going to Narnia the most out of anybody. So, yeah, of course they're going to be, believing in Narnia because it's just, a couple years before and all that, So the only real person to actually, divulge from Narnia, technically, narrative-wise, would be Susan. I mean, even the professor and, Polly, they have a trinket from Narnia that, they always remember Narnia from, and, that whole debacle that happened in Magician's Nephew, they have the wardrobe, so they remember that whole thing, right? Also, they have the rings, so they technically can go back to Narnia whenever the hell they want. Susan can't really do that. It's kind of up to Aslan to kind of, get them to Narnia. They can't retroactively get to Narnia, whenever they want, like the professor or Polly and all that stuff. So it technically does make narrative sense that Susan doesn't believe in Narnia, but the reasoning behind it is a little iffy, to say the least. If it was just, her thinking it was just a game or something that they played as kids and all that, maybe people wouldn't be so hard on her. But because she has to wear makeup and go to parties and stuff, now people have an issue with it. And I gotta admit, as it's written and as I read it, yeah, I have an issue with it too, because it seems like everyone else hasn't really moved on from Narnia, and the only one that's, trying to grow up is Susan, because, she's 21 years old, so why wouldn't you grow up? I remember when I was 21, I was ready to grow up. Are you saying there's an issue in growing up, C.S. Lewis? I mean, you kind of have to, otherwise you'll be men living under your parents' basement and all that, It's not really that well inclined. You can still have a childish heart, you can still have a vivid imagination. That's what a lot of writers do. But, don't be a kid for the rest of your life. And in fact, in the same letter, apparently, C.S. Lewis also states that, Susan always has a chance to get back to Narnia and all that type of stuff, and, believe in Narnia again and all that type of stuff. But there's another story that isn't technically part of C.S. Lewis's Narnian canon, but if you feel so inclined, you can read this book as well. It's kind of a graphic novel, actually. It's called The Problem with Susan by Neil Gaiman. And let me just say, it's a trip. This is the trippiest one. If you include this in the main canon, which, it's up to you, honestly. It's technically not part of the main canon again, but, you can add to it if you really feel so inclined again. This is the trippiest one in the entire saga of Narnia, because I won't go into extreme detail because it's technically not part of the main canon of Narnia, but apparently the Aslan and the White Witch have sex, and then they devour the kids in a dream sequence. Yeah, we're in that type of the internet kind, folks. But anyway, that's just for basically shock factor, honestly. The main crux of the story, though, is Susan actually growing up. We see that Narnia is actually, published as novels now, like children's novels now. And Susan actually not taking everything all too well, because you gotta remember, her entire family, everyone she knew and loved, even her parents, died in this train crash. So it's assumed in this story that Susan lost everyone she knew and loved within this train crash and decided to write Narnia out of their memory and all that, which honestly is more believable than anything else in this entire saga. If she lost everyone she knew and loved in a train crash, she would still be, she wouldn't want to go back to Narnia. She wouldn't even know. She would kind of put that out of her mind, honestly. So with this little story here, it kind of highlights a lot of interesting facts about Christianity that I really don't want to get into, about how with this short story, with the letters that C.S. Lewis provides and all that, it's open to interpretation as to whether Aslan actually caused the crash and had all the kids go on to the train in order to have it crash and all that. It's very high in the what if scenarios here, because it's a question about how free will works, whether or not, if God's so powerful and all that, then, why would he be so insecure to deny people for believing in him and all that? It's a lot of crazy shenanigans that a lot of people, a lot of religions have put up in having their own interpretation as to why this stuff happened. I'm not going to get into it because it's a really, really, really thick set of work here that, hey, you can write a whole book about it. I would probably be sitting here with another hour added to this one review that I'm not even going to get into. Also, another reason I think a lot of people have issues with this particular story within the last battle is because technically it doesn't add anything. The whole Susan argument didn't even need to happen because it doesn't add anything. It's not blatant enough to add anything. It's just happens. It happens, and then they're just on to other things. It's not even a side plot. It's just a passing reference to which I, as well as many other people, including kids, are just like, what? After the years she was working to, build up Narnia and all that stuff, that is how you're going to end the whole Narnian saga with Susan? It's nothing. She gets nothing. Also, to be fair, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a critique on the characters themselves, but the whole thing about her wearing makeup and having a social life and all that, that was before they knew that they were dead. And the book kind of ends after, Aslan transforms into Jesus and just has magical adventures with the children later on and all that. But, Lewis, you could have added maybe 2 or 3 pages explaining the whole thing with Susan, Yeah, you could have, but you were too busy inserting Lord of the Rings references into all of your books and just not explaining a lot, not showing a lot of your action, instead of just having Lewis lore dumps, that you decided not to add anything to Susan. You could have had a LLD, a Lewis lore dump, right at the end with Susan. You're known for these things. Why didn't you do it? And it's not just that. A lot of people tend to, including myself, believe that Susan, meant something because she was part of the most popular works within the saga, She was part of the first book. The first book that, is the most popular among the entirety of the series. The fact that she doesn't have a happy ending is almost cruel. It's just cruel. So, with all that said and done, where do I add this book to the overall list? Now, to be fair, we kind of have to take this into account. Technically, this is the Bible for kids, so you gotta give some caveat to Lewis, because the book of Revelation, which is basically what this book is technically inspired by, it's a very, very highly debated book within the main canon of the Bible. Like I said, to the point where scholars are still, deciphering it today and all that, like explaining what exactly is going on, what is all this, and all that stuff. So I get it, but at the same time, I don't think Lewis really crafted this book to be the perfect ending. In fact, I think he had a quota where it had to be a certain length, and he had to squish it. It seems like he squished a lot of this book down because there was a page rule or something. I mean, technically, he could have written 2 books, like The Lord of the Rings is technically published as 3 books, so he could have done that. But for some reason, he wanted this particular book to be this length. So, as a result of trying to explain the book of Revelation to kids, he also added a lot of inconsistencies and plot holes and telling and not showing that is just very blatant. And it also gives context as to why he published these 2 other books, The Horse and His Boy and The Magician's Nephew, before he published this last book. Because I guess they were supposed to explain why he made this book in the first place. He didn't really have a plan. Before this became the Bible for kids, he just kind of did his own thing, which is kind of one of the reasons why the first book is that good. It's because he had a story to tell. But then, as the series went on, it just became the Bible for kids. And while also explaining a lot of things, it also really added a lot more questions than answers. And I get it, it's fantasy and all that, and you're not supposed to have every single answer, whatever. But at the same time, there's questions that I would like answered that are just so in your face that it's kind of hard to ignore. Like, Susan, for instance. So the whole reason, the whole Book of Revelation for kids thing, that's why it's not as bad as The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But I don't think it's as good as The Prince Caspian either. Which is why it's kind of in between. Kind of like The Silver Chair. Now, would it be better than The Silver Chair? In fact, no, I would actually put it below it. Because there's just a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of just questions that are just left unanswered. That are just... It leaves a sour taste in my mouth as I read this book. But hey, at least with this book, it wasn't completely boring like The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's just there because it's the Revelation for kids. Book of Revelation for kids, whatever. Oh boy. We've come to the end of this book series. I can't believe we actually got here after having to re-record certain scenes, certain, things and all that, because I actually lost some of the stuff that I recorded and all that, so I had to re-record it. So I actually fleshed out a lot more of my opinions on these books. So there's that, I guess. I guess the last question is, do I recommend the Chronicles of Narnia to, everyone? And to that I say, surprising enough, yeah. Yeah, I think I do. And it's not necessarily why you may think I would recommend these books. In fact, I would recommend just a select few, if you will. I would actually kind of recommend, maybe, at the very most, The Magician's Nephew, of course, the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian, actually. Those are actually very enjoyable reads that I didn't hate myself reading. And although there's a few lore inconsistencies in the Prince Caspian, it's a lot less blatant than other books in this series. Also, within this book series, like specifically these books, they're not racist. Actually, I would also recommend The Horse and His Boy specifically because it actually had a good beginning, middle, and end, and actually had a character arc for these characters. But I would also say, hey, before any kid read this book, just keep in mind, people of color, or people with color that's not necessarily yours, they're fine too, okay? They're not bad. People with other religions, they're not bad, okay? They're just doing their own thing, and you can do your own thing too if you so desire. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I mean, there's no real big racism in there necessarily, but yeah, it's extremely boring, and I would recommend not picking up that book. But if you want to read some sea voyages in the Narnia world, might as well, Silver Chair, I mean, that's okay as well. It's not going anywhere necessarily. The Last Battle, oof. Here we go. If you read the subtle backstory behind this book, like for instance, this is supposed to be the Book of Revelation, I would say read that before you read this book. And then, after you read this book, read the letters that C.S. Lewis has to, say about the problem with Susan and all that, because honestly, yeah, don't read this to your kids. I don't think this is necessarily a kid's book that they'll be satisfied with for the very end. The first three books I mentioned,